6-month hiatus is officially over, and Locked On Clemson is back. We cannot wait. Same show, but new host, and we're ready to roar louder than ever. Today, we're going to dive into what this podcast is going to be and much, much more. Welcome to the show.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Clemson podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Clemson your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast at, as well as on YouTube. We are part of the amazing Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Here on the Locked On Clemson podcast, we are here to bring you all sports, all passion, all of the time, or we are bringing you everything you need to know about Clemson sports. Today, we are officially back. It has been 6 long months of a break, but the Locked On Clemson podcast is back. We're back. And we are returning to you after this long hiatus with a new host. My name is John Bivens. You can see it down here. That's me. I know some of y'all are like, who is this guy? I don't want to listen to just some random guy. I want to know more about you. I want to know why I should be listening to you. Hey, that's fine. Today, we're going to dive into that. We're going to let you know exactly who I am, as well as why you should listen to the Locked On Clemson podcast. But we're also going to dive into some sports talk. We're going to talk about Jack Clark, why he's the MVP of this season, as well as who needs to step up for Clemson football this upcoming season. I'm John Bivens. You can find me on Twitter here at I am John Bivens. And today we're going to start this episode off by letting you know a little bit more about who I am. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I'll admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly game. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store and Google Play Store. So let's get started. Let's kick this episode off. Y'all want to know more about me. You don't want to listen to some stranger. You don't want to just listen to some random guy. No, you want to know who you're listening to. Hey, my name's John. I grew up real close to Clemson, about an hour away in North Carolina side, and I'm a huge Clemson fan. Lifelong, I've pulled for them through the ups, through the downs. If you're a Clemson fan, you know there's been some valleys other than Death Valley. There's been some storms, right? But I've been there with you faithfully, pulling for our Clemson Tigers along the way. But I'm a little bit more than a fan. I'm also a founder and lead writer for the Clemson Tiger Wire. What that is, it is a blog place. It's a website. You can find it at thetigerwire.com that we post just blogs, mainly in season for football and basketball. We just go through and write different blogs about different recruits, different transfers, post-game highlights, all that kind of stuff. So we used to do a podcast called the Tiger Wire Podcast, but it is now here on Locked On. Locked On is such a better platform, and it's better for the listener. It's better for you as the viewer joining us on these conversations. So that's why our podcast is all over here now. Some of you are listening and have never heard of me before. Some of you are coming over from the Clemson Tiger Wire. So either way, welcome. We're going to join these fan bases together. And so, like I said, I was the lead writer and founder of the Clemson Tiger Wire. Also hosted that podcast for a while. But I'm also a credentialed media person for Clemson University. What that means is for baseball, basketball, and football, I've been credentialed media, which means I get to go sit on media row, sit in the press conferences, ask the players, ask the coaches different conversations, be able to just dive into different things about them. This past season, I was in Little John sitting in the on media row, and after games, I got to walk in and talk to Brad Brownell in the post-game conference and ask him questions regarding the loss or regarding the victory or how the program's going or different questions regarding that. I asked PJ Hall how his performance was and getting ready to leave Clemson possibly in the draft. Talked to Joe Girard about coming to Clemson and the culture shock that was coming to Clemson over at Syracuse. Talked to Chase Hunter about having a baby and what that brought to his game. If you didn't know, he had a baby mid-season, and we got to talk through that and different aspects of that. Ask Jack Clark, asked all these questions. I've got to sit into the baseball and ask Coach Eric about their opening game this year. I was able to be there and talk to him about the amazing victory and the momentum that's surrounding Clemson baseball. We're in those post-game conferences. We're credentialed media where we get to have these conversations with players and coaches, and we're going to bring all of that right here on the Locked On Clemson podcast. When it comes to this podcast, you're going to hear audio snippets from media rooms. You're going to hear where we record those questions. We record them talking. We're going to play those on this show and share with you what their thoughts are, what their feelings are, where they're at. We're also going to give you quotes from coaches, from players, reactions after the games. We're going to share with you first spot your every day about what they're thinking right after game day, what their reactions were right after a big moment. You'll hear more about that. And at the end of the day, before I was a writer, before I was a podcast host, before the Twitter account, before any of that, I was a fan. I'm a lifelong Clemson fan. Clemson sports, if you ask my wife, controls too much of my emotions. I get happy when we win. I'm crushed when we lose. So when it comes to this podcast, we're going to be professional. We're going to bring you breaking news. We're going to bring you stats. We're going to bring you all this amazing stuff. We're going to bring you all the professional and media aspect of it. But you're going to hear it from a fan. This is a professional podcast for the fans by a fan. And so we're going to provide you all these amazing things, but you're going to hear it from the mouth of a fan. You're going to hear it from someone who is just as passionate about the Clemson Tigers as much as you are and as much as anyone out there is. At the beginning of this episode, I said a tagline that said you're going to hear a lot more. It's that the Locked On Clemson is about all sports, all passion, all of the time. And that tagline really describes what we're going to be here on the Locked On Clemson show. We're going to break that down. So all sports, what that means, we're not just a Clemson football podcast. We're going to talk about football a lot, but that's not all we are. We're not just a Clemson basketball podcast. We're going to talk about that a lot, but that's not all we are. We're not, you see the point. We're going to talk about all Clemson sports. Hey, I don't know if you know this, Clemson's men's soccer team just won a national championship this year. We're reigning national champions right now. Clemson is a national champion of this year. We should celebrate that, and we're going to talk about it. Our women's gymnastic team had a great first year. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about those other sports that aren't as popular, but we're going to talk about all sports all the time. Again, we're going to focus in on basketball and football because those are the most two popular ones. We're going to spend a lot of time on those, but we're all sports here. We are a Clemson Athletics Sport podcast that's going to highlight all of those amazing achievements. So all sports, all passion. What that means is what we talked about. Guys, I'm going to bring you the passion that comes forward. I'm not going to read a script. I'm not going to go through and tell you what I think I should be saying, or I'm not going to limit my thoughts. I'm not going to censor anything. I'm going to tell you my honest reactions. If Clemson goes out and blows chunks the first game of the season in football, we're going to talk about it. We're going to be honest about it, right? We're not going to jump off the ship right away, but we're going to be true. We're going to be honest with who we are. We're going to be passionate about what's happening at Clemson University, because at the end of the day, we're not just some broadcast. We're Locked On is not about just being some random guy talking about sports. Locked On is about passionate people, incredible, knowledgeable people bringing you content, and that's what Locked On Clemson is. We're all sports, we're all passion, and the last part is we are all of the time. What that means is Locked On provides amazing resources where this podcast is going to be every single day, Monday through Friday. Starting today, April 24th, this Wednesday afternoon, we're going to bring you episodes every single day, Monday through Friday, barring anything that comes up, where you can hear every day. This could be your first listen. You can hear all this sports, all this media, all this information, all this passion, the first thing to kick off your day, and you can hear it every single day all about your Clemson Tigers. And so that's what this podcast is going to be. That's what the Locked On Clemson podcast is. This is a podcast where we're all about Clemson University, bringing you all sports, all passion, all of the time. In just a moment, we're going to dive into some of those sports, and we're going to talk about who was the MVP this year. I'll give you a hint. It wasn't one of our big three players. So we're going to talk about that and much more in just a second.
It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your number one place to bet on every game. I'm telling you, folks, FanDuel is number one sportsbook in America, so you shouldn't waste any time trying any of those other apps. So here's what I need you to do. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Yes, I said $150. That's $150 win or lose. And I'm telling you, you can bet on anything because right now is the perfect time. Like I mentioned, the playoffs going on. NHL playoffs is going on. Baseball is going crazy right now. So you can bet on anything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks and much, much more. All on the app that's super safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com FanDuel.com/LockedOn, LOCKEDEDON, and make your first bet an automatic win because FanDuel is America's number one.
Welcome back to the Locked On Clemson podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we are your team every day. If you're enjoying this episode and this podcast, make sure to check out other Locked On shows. The Locked On, if you're excited about NFL draft and coming up soon, Nate Wiggins is going to be a first-round draft pick. Fingers crossed. I'm an Eagles fan. Hopefully he goes there. If you're into NFL mock drafts, the Locked On NFL mock draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL mock draft is available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And so now you've heard about what this podcast is going to be. You've heard about what this podcast is going to do, what we're going to go moving forward. Let's jump into some sports talk. Let's jump into some takes. Let's hear you know a little bit more about what I believe, what my thoughts are. Hey, let's jump in. Jack Clark. We're just going to start out hot. Jack Clark was the MVP of this past basketball season. This past basketball season was a great year, right? If you're a Clemson fan, one of the best years that Clemson has had of all time. The second best, tied the best ever with an Elite Eight run. A really good season. It was one with a lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of talent, a lot of questions. If you follow Clemson basketball, you've probably heard the fighting right now between who our head coach should or should not be. It was a great year. It was a really, really good year for Clemson basketball, a fun year to be a part of it, a fun year to be in the stadium, in the press conferences rooms. And so when you look through and you look back at the season, we want to talk about who was the MVP, who was the most valuable player when it comes to Clemson season. And when I say MVP, I do not mean the most talented, right? The most talented would easily be P.J. Hall, Joe Girard, Chase Hunter, right? It'd be one of our big three. Ian Shefflin's up there, right? That's not what I mean when I say MVP. I also do not mean the one that if you took them off the team, that our team would be the same. No, P.J. Hall is the face of the program. P.J. Hall is the guy that Clemson basketball these past couple of years have been P.J. Hall's team. That's not what I'm talking about. When I say MVP, what I mean is who is the guy that's performance played such a big role that without their performance, whether it was noticeable or not, we would not have made the Elite Eight. Obviously, P.J. Hall's up there, but my opinion, my strong, and I hold tight to this, I've argued with people before, my opinion is that Jack Clark is the MVP of the season. And the reason I say that is a couple different things. I think there's 4 different ways that it truly brings forth this, and there's 4 different reasons why Jack Clark is. Number 1 is his rebounding. All the holes that we had every single time. If you watch Clemson basketball, we had went through a lot of seasons where there were holes that were there, whether it was because of foul trouble, whether it was because of people just not showing up, whether it was because of the defensive scheme from other team. There were holes that needed to be filled in certain games. And a hole that popped up a lot was we really needed some rebounding. We started off rebounding really hot against like the smaller schools, lesser opponents. But then once we got into that serious play after that strong start that we had, going 11-1 to begin the season, after that first part of ACC season, we started off a rough stretch where we couldn't rebound the ball. So what happened? Jack Clark got healthy. Brad Brownell put him in the lineup, and he didn't focus on scoring. He didn't focus on any of that. He focused on rebounds. And there was a stretch where he was putting up 8, 9, 10, 11 rebounds for multiple games in a row. He could rebound the ball really well. And when you look into the NCAA tournament, how he did there, the last 2 games he didn't rebound really well, but against Baylor, pulled down 8 boards. New Mexico State, 8 boards. He showed up, right? ACC tournament, we didn't have a good performance, would nor any of that from everybody because that was an ugly game. But no, at the end of the day, Jack Clark, he's a rebounder. He rebounded the ball really well. And what I love about it, when you look at his stats, he's only averaging like 5 rebounds a game. Well, you got to take into consideration, 1, he didn't really play a lot of minutes at the beginning because he was hurt all offseason, had to take some time getting used to the format, to the schemes. But once he started playing consistently, he rebounded the ball really well. You also have to think about this. When it was the ball and like say Ian Shefflin, P.J. Hall were down low in the paint and a rebound came down, Jack Clark wasn't going to crash the boards and fight his own teammates for a rebound. None at all. Jack Clark, instead, he's going to fight against the other team. So, yes, he did not pad his stats. He didn't go pull out super great numbers when it came in stats, but stats don't say the whole story. I want to look at truly the performance. He was physical. He played. He boxed out. He was great at rebounding. But also, his defense was electric. In my opinion, he's the best defensive player we had on the team. He was so good defensively when it came to this season. A lot of times we put him on our best player or on the best player of the other team. When we played teams like Carolina, when we played Chapel Hill or Tar Heels in Chapel Hill, there was times when Jack Clark, we were at that game, we were screaming at, the crowd was crazy. There was times when Jack Clark was guarding RJ Davis and when he was guarding Armando Baycott. He guarded the best players. He could, not only could he guard them, he could stick with them. He shut RJ Davis down pretty well. I think RJ Davis only had 2 points when Jack Clark was guarding him. So he can shut him down. He's a great defensive player. He's really high. He's like 6'10", has a crazy arm length, wingspan. He's a really good defensive player. When we play Duke is known for having talent. They're one of those teams that'll always have talent. They just get some of the best recruits. This year, they have 2 first-round draft picks that are going to happen. It's going to happen. It's coming up soon. But in that NBA draft, they're going to have 2 first-round picks, Jared McCain, Kyle Filipowski. When we played Duke, it was a tough game. It came down to a last-second whistle where the refs gave Duke 2 free throws to win the game, which I don't think it was a foul, but we'll move on. Don't get stuck in the past. Don't get stuck in the past, but moving on. No, Jack Clark played great defense. He guarded Jared McCain for part of that game. He guarded Kyle Filipowski. He guarded Mark Mitchell, who's a freak athlete. Or he guarded Sean Stewart, who's an even bigger athlete. Like, he guarded the best players, and he guarded from the 1 to the 5 and did a really, really, really good job. Because of that, you could not have him on the court. You had to have him on the court. The third reason that I think he's MVP is he brought such a high level of experience. Jack Clark transferred to us for 1 year from NC State. He's leaving us. He's going somewhere. He's leaving us after this year, and I hate that. I really wish he was sticking around, but I get it. Do what's best for you. But he brought a very high experience to the team. Now, we were an old team in general. We only had 1 freshman on the roster who ended up redshirting. Only had a couple sophomores. We were experienced an older team. We're at risk of losing 8 players, and now it's going to be more than that with the transfer portal due to experience. So we were an experienced team, but Jack Clark, his experience knowing different schemes, playing in ACC, the basketball before from NC State, his experience brought a whole different knowledgeable level that really showed on the court that he knew what he was doing when we were playing other players. So his experience makes him part of the MVP. And the last one is this, and this might be the biggest one. When it came down, our success was really defined by 2 people, PJ Hall and Ian Shefflin, right? I mean, that's when you look at the team, those were the 2 to talk about. Everybody had the chef's hats for Ian Shefflin. PJ Hall went wild, went crazy this year, had a great year. A little bit disappointing stats-wise, but still a really good player. They both had some struggles when it came to foul trouble, when it came to all these different things. Jack Clark was able to provide a relief of pressure from them. When it came to foul trouble, he could step in and play big. When it came to scoring, he could score when need be. He relieved some pressure from our main players and allowed them to play more free and more fundamentally sound basketball. Guys, that is why Jack Clark was the MVP. If it wasn't for Jack Clark, if it wasn't for all those things, if it wasn't for the performance that he had this year, there's no way Clemson would have made an Elite 8 run. There's no way we would have been as successful as we were if it wasn't for Jack Clark. And he didn't even play most of the first part of the season. Maybe the first 25%, he wasn't even there. So that is why Jack Clark is by far the MVP of this past basketball season. And so here, that is our opinion. That's what we think. Now, in just a moment, we're going to switch sports again. We're going to give you a little touch of everything today, and we're going to jump in, and we're going to talk about who needs to step up for our 2024 football season. I'll give you a hint. It's a very simple answer. Cade Klubnik. Got to be better, Cade. Got to be better. I don't know about you, but my wife and I, we are very competitive. We find ourselves being very competitive people, and we like to play games. We like to compete against each other. And so my competitive side is also a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you get to play not 1, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part of playing the game isn't even just simply playing the game. It's being able to compete against friends, but I like to compete against my wife at it. We'll grab each other's phones and compete against each other. I can charge her rent on iconic properties just like the classic Monopoly, but now I can also heist their riches and all of her vaults for riches of my own. And the leaderboards show us a great way to be competitive over who is the biggest Monopoly tycoon. It's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with your friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and on Google Play. I also don't know about you, but it is official MLB season, and I am loving it. I know most Clemson fans are Braves fans. I'm more of a Padres fan myself. Well, being so far away, I try to go down to Atlanta every year and watch the Padres take on the Braves. And the most frustrating part of it is that that's always behind the tickets. It's either super expensive, the added fees kill you, there are no good deals, and the last-minute tickets are never a great experience. Gametime has came and solved those problems. Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime keeps the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. When we go to Atlanta this year, we're not even going to buy tickets beforehand because we know Gametime will have us with great seats and great deals right before first pitch. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That is, again, terms apply. Agree. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEG for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And so I just gave you a hot take regarding Clemson basketball, right? I gave you that hot take of who the MVP of the season was. I gave you that hot take about who it is, but now it's time to switch over into football, and it's not going to be as hot of a take. This one is very much simple. When it comes to Jack Clark being MVP, most people don't agree with me until they hear me out, and then I convince them otherwise because, you know, it's a great argument. And now you can know Jack Clark's MVP. But when it comes to football, we got some work to do, right? This past season was some tough work. It was hard to watch. It was hard to experience. And let's be honest, we lost 4 games total. That losing 4 games is the worst game we've had in a long time, or a worst season Clemson football's had in a long time. But that's still a very good season for a lot of other programs. So let's not be spoiled as being Clemson fans with having a series of good seasons. But that's not the point. The point is this. In order for our football season to be better this year, in order for our 2024 season to return back to that Clemson football, nationally known, successful program that Clemson is known as, we've got to have someone step up. We've got to have a certain player step up, and that player is Cade Klubnik. This isn't some groundbreaking take. This isn't some hot take, but this is simply laying out the facts. In order for us to be better, in order for Clemson to be better, Cade Klubnik has got to step up and be the quarterback that he came in to be. When Cade was recruited, he came into Clemson as the 29th overall recruit according to ESPN 300. He was the first at his position, 9th in the region, 9th in the state, overall 87 scout grade. He was supposed to be really good from Austin, Texas, from a really known high school out of Westlake High School. He was supposed to be really good. He came in here supposed to be absolutely outstanding. His freshman year, DJU was his last year. And DJU was up and down, showed glimpses of greatness, but overall was inconsistent. Led us to a mediocre year. I mean, I say mediocre. We lost a couple games, won the ACC tournament, but lost the Orange Bowl. But anyway, so DJU was there, and he was all right. So Cade Klubnik only played in 1.5 games, really, his freshman year. And then last year, he came in as a sophomore, but really a freshman because he didn't have much playing time, but came in as a sophomore and really didn't have the best year. I mean, you look at it, we opened the season up against Duke. We scored 1 offensive touchdown. We won we lost 28-7. Rough game, right? Rough way to start. And then we had 2 good wins against smaller schools. And then we lost to Florida State, who was at number 4 at the time. Should have been in the college football playoffs last year. That's a different podcast, different argument another time. But we lost to them in overtime in a way we should have won that game. Cade made some different decision makings. We lost 2 other games that year. We lost to Miami in overtime. We lost to NC State at NC State. We shouldn't have lost either of those games. But we ended up winning in the Gator Bowl against Kentucky and ended the year on a 5-0 win streak. And so that's big. When it comes down to Cade's performance, he was questionable, right? He made some decisions he shouldn't have made. He'd sky some balls. He'd throw into really tight coverage that you couldn't have fit a needle through, much less a football, and get picked off. He also didn't run the ball. His freshman year, he only ran the ball like 40 times compared to like 140 his sophomore year, and he almost had as many yards as freshman year in a third of the amount of rushes. So rough, right? Like that's rough. And so his running ability wasn't really the same. His decision making when he would choose to run wasn't the same. His passing the ball wasn't as crisp. It just overall he looked like a freshman. He looked like someone that didn't have a lot of experience, didn't have a lot of confidence, didn't have really the ability to make the decisions and make the throws that he needed to throw. I do not think that Cade Klubnik isn't the answer. After that spring game, I don't know if you watched spring game a little bit back, but Cade Klubnik didn't really play the best. Our third-string quarterback, Pierman, played absolutely – he balled out. I mean, he balled out. And there's a lot of people right now saying Pierman should be our starter. I disagree. Right now, I think Cade is still the guy. I think Cade is still the starting quarterback and needs to still remain the starting quarterback for the Clemson Tigers this year. I think he's going to step up. I think he's going to be better. I think we're going to see the Cade that we all heard about, the one that reminded everyone of Deshaun Watson when he came into it, the one that has that potential to be as electric of a player as possible. Look, Clemson football is known for being really well. We've went through past years where we've been really successful, and that's been leaning on an outstanding defense, but also elite quarterbacks. Going back to Kyle Parker, to Taj Boyd, to Cole Stout, to Deshaun Watson, to Trevor Lawrence, even backups. Chase Bryce was really good. He was electric when he transferred to App State. We've had great quarterbacks. And now in the past couple of years, we've had kind of a rut where we had DJU who didn't live up to performance, their expectations. We also had Cade Klubnik he's been off. He hasn't been what he sought to be. So in order for our season this year, in order for us to truly return back to that Clemson football that we all know and love, Cade Klubnik has got to be better. He's got to step it up. His performance has got to be better. And I think he will. He's going to be better. He's going to return back to that form. He's going to be the Clemson quarterback that we all knew he could be. And guys, I got high hopes, and high, you know the song. Got really high hopes for Cade Klubnik's performance. I'm excited about that. Excited about what he's going to do and everything that's going to lead to be. And so that is why I think in order for Clemson football to be successful this year, in order for us to be able to make it back to Clemson football, the program we're known as being, Cade Klubnik has got to step up. And that will wrap up this edition of the Locked On Clemson podcast. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to go through the state of the university episode, kind of state of the university. You get it? State of the union, state of the university. We're going to dive in. We're going to talk about where the program's at, what the state of our 3 biggest sports are: baseball, basketball, and football. We're going to dive into what those programs are, where they're at right now. They're in different points. Football's in preseason, basketball's in postseason, and baseball's right in the middle of their season. So we're going to go through and talk about where those programs are, transfers, what's surprising, what's hurting, what's disappointing, what they need. We're going to tackle all of that tomorrow on tomorrow's episode. And let me know your thoughts on today's topics. Reach out to me on Twitter at @IamJohnBivens, or you can email me at thetigerwire@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your feedback on what we talked about today. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcast at, Spotify, Apple. Hit that subscribe, rate us 5 stars. If you're on YouTube, subscribe over on YouTube. Drop a comment what you're thinking. Would love to talk to you about different things and dive into what we talked about today. But that's going to be it for today on the Locked On Clemson podcast. We can't wait to see you on tomorrow's episode. But until then, keep that Tiger pride alive and roaring. And as always, go Tigers.